Khorne's Campaign Mechanics have been released in a blog by CA, so let's have a look. Kill, maim, burn. We expect nothing less from Khorne, and our first mechanic is Skulls and the Skull Throne, obviously. So much like every other faction, we've got a currency unique to the faction. For Khorne, it's Skulls. They'll be generated in the obvious ways, mostly through battles, post-battle decisions, dilemmas, buildings, and anything else, it says. But there'll also be skull piles around the map from past battles. Even if it was from factions that had nothing to do with you, you can go and steal the skulls that are left over and whack them on the Skull Throne, basically. And doing so will give you a massive set of buffs, including bonuses to post-battle loot and movement range bonuses after raising settlements. But we're also going to be using those skulls, we're going to have to spend them on occupying settlements. So unlike most factions where you go and you smash the garrison and then you take over the settlement pretty much for free, you're going to have to pay in your hard-earned skulls to actually occupy it. So you may not want to occupy as many settlements as you normally might. So we're going to be encouraged to sack and raise rather than occupy a lot of the time. So that's the main use of our skulls and our currency. Onto the blood calls. Now when we raise a settlement, we'll have two options. You can either raise it up and generate a ton of skulls, killing everybody and just raising the settlement to Scheisse. That's the Skulls for the Skull Throne option. Then there's also a Blood for the Blood God option, which will replenish your boys and also spawn a new Blood Host army nearby. This cannot replenish or recruit, but is otherwise unlimited in its capabilities and costs no upkeep. The power of these armies scale with how many you have created, though the numbers of units they spawn will be increased through various means. So we're going to get free armies, essentially. So you'll be able to charge them off, whether they're like half stacks or full stacks. They won't be able to recruit or replenish, so they're kind of one-time use, but you could charge them in to take a settlement nice and easy, or to take out an army that's bothering you, or at least to injure them so that your main army can then go and finish them off. But it does say that as time goes on, they will suffer attrition, so they're not going to be there forever if you don't use them, so it's going to be best to just use them as quick as possible, charge them into whatever you can, and just keep that fighting going, get the blood flowing, get the skulls rolling. Something like that. It also says that if you have raised a settlement and you decided not to occupy it, there is a chance it'll be automatically colonized at no cost. So you can go around, raise up some settlements. You don't have to spend your skulls on colonizing it. You can just walk away and let it maybe be automatically colonized. But there is a chance that another faction will come along and claim it. So I guess there is that little bit of risk there if you want to risk losing a settlement that you might actually want. Maybe you don't have the skulls to pay for it, or maybe you don't want to fork out for it. But it sounds interesting. I think it's going to be all about fighting and raising and attacking, so kind of Beastmen campaign vibes, maybe Taurox-ish campaign vibes, where you really just need to keep rolling, keep fighting everybody in sight. But it's not going to be all about building up your economy and your civilization in the traditional sense. So it might offer a bit of a different experience in that area, I think. Sounds cool, though. And that brings us to Bloodletting, which basically says that Khorne needs to fight and kill stuff, otherwise his armies wither away. So if you try to play total diplomacy, or if you try to become an expert trade merchantman, your armies and your civilization will kind of wither away. It lowers your replenishment, it lowers your growth if you're not fighting, so you need to be getting stuck in all of the time to somebody, because it will impact your growth, replenishment rates, global recruitment time, and more. So you gotta keep fighting basically all of the time. Sounds like my kind of campaign personally. I did enjoy the new Beastmen rework campaign where you're just basically that as well, just fighting all of the time, always moving around. That was pretty cool. On to Unholy Manifestations and Cults. So these were in the Tzeentch blog. We kind of know what these are. Basically, the more corruption you spread of your kind, so in this case Khorne corruption, the better a tier of Unholy Manifestation you'll be able to use. So the first one you'll have unlocked from the start spawns a small Khornite army to attack your own army, triggering Bloodletting, giving you skulls, favor, and XP. So you call an army to attack yourself, basically. And this kind of sounds like a silly idea, right? But we get the skulls from it, which we need. Doesn't matter whose skulls they are, right? As long as they're skulls and they're going on the Skull Throne, Khorne boys are happy. This is kind of like the tactic that people do already in Total War, where they'll let a settlement go to rebellion and then just farm the rebellion armies to get XP and stuff. That's the first one. On to the next one, Call of Battle, which requires more corruption, of course. Gives an army 50% movement range. That could be very useful in the right time if you're trying to push a certain faction really quick. On to Slaughter Incarnate, requires 2,000 Khorne corruption. Double an army's skull gains from battle for several turns. So just more skulls to generate with that one. A currency boost. Onto the last one though, Khorne's Glare requires the most corruption, disables a friendly army's movement for several turns, and at the end it raises the local settlement automatically and gives a massive number of skulls. This sounds ridiculously powerful. Imagine rolling up to Altdorf and it's got a full 20 stack in there of all the best units, and they got a 20 garrison in there. That would be a tough fight to take down. Well, you can just use Khorne's Glare and just raise that settlement after a few turns without actually having to go and fight them. That's pretty powerful. That could be pretty brutal. But as it requires the most corruption, it's probably going to take a while for you to get to that point, so it shouldn't be too OP, hopefully, except maybe in the late game. We'll have to see. But hey, everything's OP in the late game anyway. Then we've got the cults. Those can form in enemy settlements. You can build a hideout, which will give you some skulls, a fighting pit, which will give you some skulls if you fight in that province. Then there's a lodge, generates a large supply of skulls per turn if a lord of any faction is present. So again, just more skull generation. The arena, though, is pretty interesting. Destroys the cult upon completion, but teleports your faction leader and their army to the settlement. So that could be a pretty nasty surprise if suddenly... Actually, that's going to be pretty horrible to fight against. Imagine you're just chilling at one of your settlements, and then suddenly a massive Khorne Scarbrand army pops up next to one of your other settlements out of nowhere. Sounds like fun to play with, but maybe horrible to play against. We shall see. But that's our unholy manifestations and cults. The same thing we had in the Tzeentch campaign as well, so we can assume that we'll see these for Slaanesh and Nurgle as well, and they'll have different abilities of the same kind of thing. The more corruption they spread, the better an ability they'll get. So it'll be interesting to see what those two other factions get as well. And then on to the tech tree, which is... Tech tree, as I say, to me they're all kind of similar. This one, it's broken up into bunches of 8. Once you've unlocked 3 of them, you can move on to the next bunch, and the next bunch, and the next bunch across. So you'll be able to pick and choose the ones that seem most useful to you, and maybe make your way to the more powerful ones quite quickly if you only choose 3 from each category. Or you could maybe take your time and go through stuff that really does benefit you, whether it's building economy or army. And this is going to be another place that we end up spending a lot of skulls as well to unlock the technologies. And lastly, Khornate and Demonic Diplomacy. Now this bit's had a little bit of a rewording in my version than it has in the released version. So basically though, it's saying that Khorne factions will declare war automatically on everybody that isn't a Chaos faction of some kind. So Skaven, Norskins, Beastmen, Warriors of Chaos as well, which tells us that Warriors of Chaos are still going to be a faction. It sounds like they're not going to get integrated into somebody else, as we were maybe speculating. So that's interesting in itself. But yeah, automatic war for Khorne factions basically against anybody that isn't a Chaos-y type faction. That is how you're going to keep the skulls a-coming, right? So you're going to be at war with a lot of people a lot of the time. Going to be interesting to see how that gets managed. You're going to have a lot of armies to hopefully deal with that. But that doesn't mean that you're not going to be fighting other Chaos factions. You can declare war on them. It just won't be automatic like every other faction, that's all. So you'll still be able to hate on Slaanesh and attack the bastard for being Khorne's rival. And that is about the gist of it all. So there we go, Khorne's Campaign Mechanics. What do you reckon? Sounds pretty cool to me. As I say, I really enjoyed the Beastmen campaign and what they did with it. This sounds kind of similar. Going to expect that non-stop onslaught of battles and raiding and sacking and razing and looting and murdering and just having a good old time, you know? I think he'll be the first faction I play Chaos-wise. Looking forward to the hyper-aggressive battles, but also apparently the hyper-aggressive campaign playstyle as well. Should be a lot of fun. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the future.